Hi, welcome, and thank you for joining Gerber Kawasaki's webinar Q&A on video games and trends. I'm financial advisor Wendy Turk, and with me today is host and gamer Emma Fyffe. Thanks for joining
Hi, of course. Yeah, thanks for having me, Wendy.
Yeah, Emma is the host of The Download, a daily news show on the new video game entertainment news network.
Yes.
She is a guru of all things geeky.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to encompass my entire career as a guru of all things geeky. I like that.
You can take it. So before we dig in, we're going to get rid of the fun stuff, and that's the disclaimer. So all information that we discuss here today is for informational and educational purposes only. Please consult your financial or gaming professional for advice directly related to your situation. So given that, Emma, how long have you been in the industry?
Oh man, I mean, I've been in the broadcast industry, and the first sort of job I ever had as a broadcaster actually was back in 2012. I hosted a very short-lived video game news show, basically. And then I transitioned into a bunch of other stuff in terms of entertainment. I did a lot of coverage of primarily television and film. I also used to work on the Star Wars show over at Collider, which is called Jedi Council. So I've worked with Collider fandom. Yeah. So again, I've had like a toe in the broadcast and gaming industry since about 2012, and have sort of blossomed and come back around into gaming more so in 2020 than I have in previous years.
Awesome. So how big is the gaming industry?
Oh man. Well, let's see. So the gaming industry, I think right now the estimate is that it's going to generate something around just under $160 billion of revenue in 2020. Originally, it was projected, I think back like 2017, there were some projections projecting that this year would be about 90 million, up from I think like 70 or 90 billion, up from about 75 billion. But because of the COVID-19 crisis, I would say that the numbers have just gone exponentially up.
Yeah, we will definitely dig into the impact that coronavirus has had on the industry. But generally speaking, I feel like we know about the big players like Activision,
Yeah.
Electronic Arts, Nintendo. How much of the market do you think these big companies have?
I mean, the big companies definitely make up a huge part of the market. There's no denying that. And on top of that, you have a bunch of indie creators that also are like owned technically by Microsoft. They're subsidiaries of them or whatever. So I would say that the large companies probably make up about 70 to 80%. That's a rough estimate of kind of the industry itself. But the thing is that like even some of the big developers release like indie titles under their banner, so to speak. That, you know, they have like distribution basically, even though say it's not like, you know, Xbox say that is specifically developing something, they would still be like behind the distribution of something.
Right. And do you feel like there were any names in the smaller indie companies that are making a name for themselves?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like Annapurna Studios, they've got lots of really Annapurna Interactive. Sorry, I wanted to make sure that I said their name correctly. But yeah, they have some really interesting titles. They do things like I'm trying to like I'm trying to describe they have such a unique art style to them. So like they have a new game that was announced during the Sony PlayStation 5 showcase, which is called Solar Ash. They've also Outer Wilds was another one of their titles that did extremely well. Let me try to think of some other studios that are really kind of making a splash. There was an indie title which was called Celeste, which is made by a couple of Canadian developers that really got a lot of attention from the point of view that number one, it was an infuriatingly difficult platformer, but number two, that it also was a really like unique and refreshing and realistic observation of like mental health. So yeah.
Oh, that's definitely interesting and different, I think,
Yes. Yeah.
from what we think video games are or
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing is that like when people think about like video games, I think that people tend to gravitate towards thinking like, oh, you know, Fortnite, obviously, because that's at the forefront of so many things, because it's massively, massively popular, particularly amongst sort of a teen tween audience, and also has kind of permeated into the sort of pop culture scene in general. And things like Call of Duty or Overwatch, like a lot of stuff that particularly is very prevalent in the esports world, but there's just a lot more to gaming than that. And so it's things that like people wouldn't necessarily think of, oh, well, you know, if you're playing something like say a visual novel, people might not necessarily immediately go, oh, that's gaming, because it looks so different from what people might traditionally consider to be gaming, but it absolutely still is, because there is, you know, decision making involved and you are actively participating in something the same way that you would in a game. And it's not just reading a book and it's not just watching a TV show. There's an interactivity level to it, I think, and anything that has that is considered a game. I mean, you look at something like even, and this is a little bit more recognized, I think, as gaming, just from the point of view of, in that, like, it does bear some semblance to some older arcade titles, or you know, puzzle titles of yore, like a Tetris or something. But things like Candy Crush, like that's gaming. And so people don't necessarily think that like that is a huge, huge part of the gaming market, but it is.
So to expand on that, and one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you specifically is when I think about video games, I think it's a very guy thing. That's what guys do. That's not what, that instantly it doesn't pop into my mind that, oh yeah, girls do that too. So how many women comprise the industry? And are you the, the 10% in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more than 10%. I know for sure that at this point, I believe that women, at least on Twitch, which is a streaming platform that was mostly developed for game streaming purposes, effectively. My understanding is that I think women make up something like 35% of streamers now, actually. And again, like, it is still definitely a male-dominated industry, but I think that more women are emerging, not only, as streamers or whatever, but just as consumers in general. And there's been some studies done and things that basically, like, yeah, I found it fascinating, actually. The studies find that, like, the younger you are, the more likely the numbers between men and women who game is disparaging. And actually, the older you get, the closer those numbers become. I don't know if it's just that, like, guys stop playing. Yeah, it's so counterintuitive, but yeah, I think that, again, like, it is definitely accounting for the fact that, you've got women playing Candy Crush on their phone or whatever it might be. I mean, especially if you look at things like in in the Japanese market, and a lot of these titles have been localized as well, and are available in, like, the Google Play or the App Store or whatever. But there's a whole genre of otome games, which translates roughly to, maiden games, and that they're basically like visual romance novels. And that's a huge market. And, you've got women ages, technically they're for 18 plus, a lot of them. So I would say 16, safely, to, 40s or 50s playing games like that. So yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things where I don't even think that it's so much that women have not previously been as active in the gaming industry as, like, we're just starting to recognize more that a lot of what women are doing is gaming, which is not to say that there aren't women that, do extremely well in what people consider to be more traditional gaming, like the competitive side of stuff, particularly because esports does get so much attention now. But there are a large number of women who, are playing story games or platformers or whatever. And by and large, I find, for myself anyway, like, I am not a competitive gamer. That is not my realm at all, because I'm somebody that values, like, escapism and story over competition. And in that regard, I'm very much the norm as far as women go. So, you have women that gravitate towards games where, like, things like, I don't know, The Sims, or in this year, of course, we've seen the huge rise in Animal Crossing New Horizons on the Switch. It's more about time management and inventory management, and, like, almost building, like, little fake communities within your game.
Right. Do you feel that there are specific companies that are trying to reach more women, or that maybe
it's interesting. I'm not sure so much if there's a real drive to reach women specifically, because I think that video games in a lot of ways have already been accessible to women. And I think it's just as more women who are game consumers come out in, like, a public sort of way, with the advent of things like social media being so prevalent. I think it was one of those things where people just kind of naturally found one another. One of the things that always attracted me to things like fighting games when I was a kid, is that there were usually girl characters you could play. And we're definitely seeing a rise in the lead female character. It was so interesting because, I mean, let me get you the exact number of where the sales are at on Last of Us Part 2. But so obviously The Last of Us was a huge success when it first came out. And Last of Us Part 2 was released earlier this year. It's the fastest selling game of the entire year so far. So, and some of that, of course, has to do with the fact that it is a sequel. But again, like, it's this really interesting scenario wherein main character in the game is a woman. And so I've seen so much conversation amongst like my colleagues who are, you know, streamers and broadcasters and just generally like video games saying like, hey, video game companies, I never want to see you say girl character won't sell games again.
So do you feel like men are playing female characters?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, again, to me, it's a conversation I've had a lot about companies and properties like, say, Star Wars. So with Star Wars, Disney has a, you know, and this is true across the board with Star Wars, that there's always been a tendency to cast relatively unknown actors in leading roles. And that is because it comes with the name Star Wars. So people are going to show up to see Star Wars no matter who you put in the movie, simply because of the fact that it is Star Wars. So taking the very specific example of The Last of Us Part 2, again, there is this, it's a sequel to a game that was already very successful. And it wasn't like they shoehorned Ellie into being the main character. It made perfect sense for her to be the main character in the second game, since she was featured very prominently in the first game and had grown up since then. But still, it was really nice to see like, oh, hey, here is a company that knows people are going to show up for their product. And so they put a woman at the forefront, and it did not affect their numbers at all, as far as I can tell anyway.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So in terms of growth, you touched on this at the beginning.
Yes.
Most of us have had stay-at-home orders since mid-March, at least.
Yes.
That's where I've been. And I think we're kind of running out of things to do.
Yeah.
That has really contributed to the growth of video games. Is it?
Oh, yes, big time. I mean, so the hardware sales in April this year tripled from what they were in April of last year. I believe more than tripled, actually, in terms of, you know, people going out and buying things like a Switch or a PS4 or an Xbox One, because, again, people suddenly found themselves with time to play games. And it's really fascinating because we know that we've got next gen consoles due out at the end of this year. The Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 are both due to be released sometime before the end of 2020. Yet a bunch of people just finally bought a PlayStation 4. So it's been fascinating to see those numbers go up. And also because there are so many people who are stuck at home and people who are like in my situation, who are broadcasters or whatever, you know, a lot of people have looked into the game streaming market. And it was really fascinating because some of the things that are hardest to order for yourself on Amazon right now are things like webcams, capture cards, key lights, all the things that you would need to sort of set up a home streaming studio.
Do you feel like, I mean, I've tried to look for a Switch for my no.
Listen, I saw a thing yesterday that Best Buy had some in stock.
Better snatch those up quickly.
Yeah, that's how I got mine the first time around.
Do you think that this trend will continue once we're back to normal? Or do you think that once people start playing games that this is part of what they'll do in their daily life?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is very difficult to say because, again, like we are in a situation wherein, as you mentioned, people are running out of stuff to do. So naturally, I think there is a tendency to try to find things to fill your time with. And also, one of the things, this is a big conversation I've had with people around the gaming industry, is that things like playing a video game, in our situation, we were specifically talking about massively multiplayer online RPGs like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14. But video games in general, it gives you more of a sense that you are doing something than, say, if you're sitting watching Netflix. Like there is like a sense of accomplishment in achieving things in a video game. So you feel like, oh, I did something today because I beat this temple in Breath of the Wild or something. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because I mean, I always found for myself that when I wasn't at home as much as I have been, I tended to gravitate towards titles I could get on the Switch, because I can take the Switch with me.
Right.
And again, obviously you can't get a Switch. The Switch is still like far and away like the most in demand console for sort of your I don't like the term casual gamer. I hate the term casual gamer. If you like video games, then you are a gamer, the end. But for your sort of like, your non-competitive gamers, shall we say,
Right.
there's not too much in the competitive gaming realm on Switch outside of Smash Brothers. But yeah, I think though that there are enough companies that are really leaning into the fact that the gaming industry has been one of the least affected industries by the COVID-19 crisis. And that's because most games take so long to make that the majority of the sort of stuff that would have to be done or traditionally be done in person has been done on a lot of games that were due to be released, sometime, anytime this year. So by and large, they're able to be completed from home office situations. And even if that doesn't continue to be the case, you can record VO and things like that from home. So a lot of what needs to happen as far as gaming goes is very, very doable. And so I think that the biggest thing is that makes me think, yes, this is going to continue, is because so many other industries that are outlets of entertainment, like specifically film and television, there's nothing they can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recording has stopped. Taping,
Yeah.
It's all paused.
Yeah. And so, I think that because gaming is going to continue to push forward as an industry and be putting out new content, that like this is here to stay.
Do you see gaming, especially with streaming platforms and things like that, as part of social media? Is it becoming our new community, really?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that is the key word right there, is community. That is, for me with my Twitch community, that is the biggest thing for me. It was like and prior to streaming on my own channel, I had primarily worked with other companies that basically stream on Twitch, and I liked the platform, but as far as like my own stuff goes, for me it felt like, the streaming industry in a lot of ways is like absolutely thriving right now, because it does give you that sense of actually like having outside human contact when so many people are having very, very limited human contact. And so, it's as much as anything, a place for people to go and hang out and talk. And that is one of the things that's been pointed out a lot with women streamers, is that like the really successful ones tend to really value the community aspect of streaming, which isn't to say that the ones that play competitive games aren't excellent competitive gamers, but it's noted that like women like to engage with their Twitch chat, and to like foster that sense of like, hey, we're hanging out, we're joking around, you got a place to come talk.
Absolutely. I think those were the big points that we wanted to touch on. Do you feel like there are other ideas for the growth of the industry?
I mean, there's a lot of conversation going on right now in gaming, particularly about kind of community guidelines and protecting people who are streaming or are involved in industry events, etc. So I think that is something that is definitely being called into question, and it is being addressed by many of these companies, at least behind the scenes and publicly now, in terms of just like trying to create a place where people do feel safe. Because again, the greatest aspect of gaming for me is building that community, is and you know, this is not even just with streaming, because there are so many games that you can play online and connect with people. You know, I bring it back once again to like the MMO scene, where, you know, you have people that are in, you know, World of Warcraft guilds, and they're people that they plan to, you know, meet up with virtually and go raiding. So yeah, I mean, I think that really that is the biggest thing, is, and it's that's across social media platforms, and that's within gaming, that's within Twitch, YouTube, Facebook gaming, etc. Is just like how do you account for the people that are just there trolling, trying to get a rise out of you, versus the people that are really engaging in some harmful behavior. So I think that's something that is, again, like being dealt with as people are getting more outspoken about it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. I am so appreciative that you were able to share your knowledge with us.
Of course, yeah.
View of kind of women being
Yes.
a minority.
Yeah.
I think that if anybody wants more information on how to invest in any of these video game companies, email me, Wendy at GerberKawasaki.com. Right now, as Emma mentioned, the industry is $160 billion.
Yeah.
And that is bigger than the music and cinema industry put together. It's
yep. I was like, if I had to guess, I would say the only thing that might be bigger, and it certainly isn't now because no one could go, is theme parks.
Yeah, I was thinking Disneyland. Or not wanting to touch anything at a theme park.
No.
Of course, follow Emma on Twitter, on Twitch, on Facebook, on Instagram, and you can follow Gerber Kawasaki as well. Thank you, Emma, for your time.
Of course.
And everybody have a good day.
Bye.